Election day is almost here. Months of campaigning, debates, and ads have brought us to this moment. Our local elections with national attention. An unprecedented three-way race for New York City mayor.
Too often we think of affordability as a young person's problem, of whether you can build a life here. But there are so many who are asking themselves whether they can keep a life here.
This election is the choice between capitalism and socialism.
I look at Zoran Mandami and Andrew Cuomo as a double-headed hydra because they're both pro-criminal.
And across the Hudson, one of the closest races in New Jersey's history.
I'm going to focus on serving the people of New Jersey. That has always been my North Star, and that is what I'm going to continue to fight to do.
It's time for a change, and a whole lot of people across the state of New Jersey feel the same way, and it's not just Republicans.
A razor-thin margin separates Democrat Mikey Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli. In our final episode before election night, we're breaking down the latest polls, the final push for votes, and a look at what lies ahead. Picks on Politics starts right now.
This is Picks on Politics with Dan Manarino.
And welcome to a special edition of Picks on Politics, everybody. I am Dan Manarino, and here we are. We made it to the final weekend before Election Day. Oof. The start of these races felt like an eternity ago, and today we have two panels. There is a lot to talk about. One focused on New Jersey, the other New York City. So let's start there. The race for New York City mayor leaning heavily in Zoran Mamdani's favor. The Democratic nominee surpassing that key number, the 50% mark, with Cuomo and Sliwa at 25 and 21% respectively. Pix 11's polling with Emerson College in the Hill showed just 4% of New Yorkers at this moment have yet to decide who gets their vote. So joining me for the New York City portion of the show, senior political reporter Henry Rossoff for Pix 11, of course, the city reporter Katie Honan, City Hall reporter for the Daily News Josie Stratman, and Democratic strategist Trip Yang. So great to have all of you here for our final before Election Day. Here we are. We made it. Okay, it felt like an eternity because of the fact that primaries are now in June, so you get this longer runway. Here we are, Mamdani hitting this number of 50%, right? Which many are looking at saying it's an unbeatable number. There were a lot of polls that came out this week with Zoran Mamdani far and away the front runner. Do you think there's going to be a surprise in election night, Henry?
It would take really something very special. I mean, there's been a lot of focus on older New Yorkers who are turning out in droves during the early portion of this primary, with some sort of wish casting from the Cuomo camp that means the electorate is significantly changing. No doubt there are more people, and perhaps more people over the age of 50, but even those numbers are polling showing is breaking ever so slightly toward Mr. Mamdani. We know the young folks are going to come out, and remember, people who come to college here may have registered here between the primary and the general election, so that young surge from Mamdani might be even bigger than it was.
Yeah, that's the talking point from the Cuomo campaign, right? They were talking about college kids in particular. They could still vote by mail, but there has been this big push earlier in the week. Polls mattered to the Cuomo campaign. Here we are at the end of the week. Polls don't matter to the campaign. You were there at a couple of his events this week. What were you hearing from the Cuomo campaign?
They are really pushing that idea that, oh, if you believe the polls, then sure. The campaign is really trying to continue to instill fear in what would happen in New York City if Zoran Mamdani becomes the mayor. Cuomo was on the radio this morning discussing that people would just move out in droves. He was talking about what he called the toxic campaign feeling, but without acknowledging how he's been contributing to it. So I think the campaign, we have a couple of days to Election Day, and we'll see how things can go continually till Tuesday, because I fear it might just get worse from especially their side. Yeah,
the Cuomo campaign just today, as we're taping on Friday morning, put out, Melissa DeRosa, one of the campaign surrogates, said that she didn't like that Zoran Mamdani was going negative in ads, and then there was a tweet from Andrew Cuomo going negative on Zoran Mamdani. So when you look at the campaigns, here we are, right? You're the Democratic strategist. How'd they do?
So I'll say this. When we look at polls professionally in our consulting strategy business, you often look at favorables to unfavorables. How a candidate does with the electorate, if they're well-liked or not, that is actually a precursor to the actual horse race, the polling horse race. So, one, shout out to Pix 11 Emerson, because in the primary, you guys came the closest to coming to the primary result. But this week,
Cuomo called it an outlier.
At the time, and he's calling this one an outlier too.
Yeah, Cuomo's been wrong more than once. But I'll say this, even in the best polls for Cuomo, there was a Q poll this week that had him only down 10 points. When you look at his unfavorables, he is minus 20 with the general election electorate. Mamdani, on the other hand, he is positive territory in almost every single election poll, simply because most registered voters in New York City are registered Democrats. So even if you take the rosiest of circumstances that Cuomo's only down 10 points as opposed to 25 points, it is looking like it's a good news for Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, and it comes down to demographics, right, Josie? I mean, you take a look at what Cuomo's really been going after. He said that where he made his fatal flaw in the primary was not going after the youth vote, but I didn't see him really go after the youth vote this go around. He still was going after black voters and the plus over 50 population. In our last poll, it showed that was kind of going toward Zohran Mamdani.
Right, yeah. Zohran Mamdani has certainly won over his fair share, I think close to 50% of older voters.
Yeah.
And while Cuomo has he's had a couple events where he's hosted evenings, like young people for Cuomo type events, but that hasn't been a major push for him. And I mean, maybe he's kind of hedging his bets here. He knows that older voters are people who continue to turn out in local elections. I know today he's campaigning in Brighton Beach among older, mainly Russian voters who tend to lean more conservative. He's trying to get Republicans, older conservative voters, and he's hoping they can almost mirror what happened in the primary with younger voters rushing to support Mamdani. He's hoping the same can happen with older voters here on Tuesday.
And it has to do with the numbers we're seeing for early turnout, right? And we're 8 times the number we were 4 years ago.
A little bit closer to 5. We had that rainy day that really dampened
right.
numbers.
So we're zeroing in on like 400,000 early votes at this taping, right? And Cuomo's saying, well, it's a different group of people who are voting early this go around. He's hoping those numbers are going to go to him.
Well, this is just anecdotal, but when we saw the surge of early voters, particularly voters over the age of 55, which is how the Board of Elections breaks it down, I went on a mission and interviewed voters over the age of 55 at various early voting locations. So again, anecdotal, not scientific, but many of them said, I don't know, I guess I'll give the kid a shot, meaning Mamdani. And so it's not a straight line between you're of a certain age and you're going to vote for Cuomo. I think there is a general feeling, especially among Democrats, and the city is vast majority Democrats, especially after the era of Biden and during the era of Trump, that new, fresh change is necessary. And I think you're seeing that in this Democrat-heavy electorate.
Yeah.
One other point I wanted to make, the Cuomo campaign was for weeks, whether it was them or people surrounding them, like John Catsimatidis, pushing Curtis Lee, with a Republican, to drop out, presuming, and I think wrongfully assuming, that if Curtis Lee were dropped out, all of the votes, or even a large percentage of Curtis Lee's votes, would go to Andrew Cuomo. Right. There was a poll this week that showed that if Curtis Lee were dropped out, which at this point, why even ask? Early voting began, he's on the ballot, and there's no way he's dropping out. More of the votes went to Mamdani. So I think this is the question that we've asked the Cuomo campaign. Instead of calling on people to drop out, what are you doing to meet voters where they are? And we don't see what I was out last night until very late for me. Zohran Mamdani was doing a midnight press conference. Before that, he met with taxi drivers at LaGuardia Airport, hospital workers at Elmhurst Hospital. He went to Kebab King in Jackson Heights and spoke about these late night and overnight graveyard shift workers who he says are largely ignored. So you see an energy around his campaign and the ideas he's putting forth. You do not see Andrew Cuomo meeting with people on the street like the way that we see Curtis Sliwa and Zohran Mamdani doing.
Before that, he literally, Mamdani, sat down and painted with seniors for a substantial period of time. Today, as we're speaking, he's literally dancing in a senior center with seniors. So, you see the effort and frankly, a sort of joyous energy we've seen from him throughout this whole campaign.
Yeah, and that is the right point, that the Cuomo campaign really anticipated that if Curtis Lee were to drop out, that those voters would go to him. Curtis isn't dropping out, but that necessarily, to Katie's point, isn't the case.
Absolutely right. Look, the pathway for Cuomo is very narrow and it's straightforward. It's very outer borough voters. Think Bayside, Queens, Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, Staten Island, homeowners, pro-Israel voters. He'll pick up his share of older Black and Latino voters, but most Black and Latino voters are going to go with the Democratic nominee. And one of the final things I'll say is that in order for Cuomo to actually get the math to win this general election, he probably needs a majority of Republican voters. He needs to win independents. He probably needs 40% of registered Democrats.
Yeah.
I could see him winning independent voters, but for him to win 40% of Democrats against a coalesced Democratic Party, Mamdani, a majority of Republicans against Sliwa, that is really hard to do.
Okay, I want to talk about, we've had a lot of ups and downs along this race. You guys have been there for all of them. But one that was really bizarre this week was in the London Times about Bill de Blasio that wasn't the actual Bill de Blasio, the former mayor of New York City, who was interviewed, and it made it sound like it was a Bill de Blasio going against Zohran Mamdani, but it ended up being a Bill de Blasio from Long Island, right?
Right. I mean, a really hilarious saga to this whole already crazy election cycle. It turns out this Times of London reporter had emailed a Long Island Bill de Blasio, big D, one word. And he played along because I think he was getting lots of hate mail through the years. And he said, you know what, now's my time. And he used ChatGPT to type out a response that was very critical of Mamdani's plan. Obviously, the former mayor is a huge ally of
Did you talk to him?
Mamdani.
The Long Island Bill de Blasio?
Oh, no, I didn't. The real one doesn't call me back, but I didn't speak to either Bill de Blasio. But the whole story is very bizarre, and I think as journalists, it frightened me. As a reporter, we'll blame the editor, because why didn't the editor check that it's the correct Bill de Blasio?
Don't just email.
I'll just say, just a shout out, I'm not a reporter, but shout out to the New York City Press Corps, because you could never pull this off with our reporters here in New York City. No. Like Katie, Josie, everyone would know who the real Bill de Blasio is.
Henry, yes.
Yeah. Henry as well, right? We got pros here in New York City.
If I got that one wrong, I think I wouldn't be here.
I just, on the ballot also, I know it's gotten lesser play. All the city council races are at play. Also the DA of Manhattan, and that's the one that's kind of flown under the radar, DA Alvin Bragg on the ballot as well. Seems like he's going to win again.
Yeah, not really a contest here. I mean, he says he wasn't, specifically going after Donald Trump. This was a talking point when he won 4 years ago, but certainly prosecuting Donald Trump didn't hurt his chances here in New York City. He doesn't really have a particularly serious challenger. I don't think that is a race to watch, frankly, on election day.
Henry, you are sticking around to talk about New Jersey. Josie, great to have you here. Katie will talk to you about ballots in a few moments. And Tripp, great to see you as always, okay? Next up, everybody, from New York to New Jersey, where another race has widespread attention and national implications. Mikey Sherrill and Jack Ciattarelli vying to become the next governor of the Garden State, and every vote crucial, with just 1 percentage point separating the two. Our New Jersey panel, when we come back, Picks on Politics is back in 2 minutes.